Lecture Part 1, Violence, Religion, and Rape. Good morning, everyone. Today we begin our exploration of violence, religion, and rape, a topic that is as urgent as it is painful and yet deeply necessary for us to address. I want to start with a sobering fact. According to the World Health Organization, violence is the fourth leading cause of death among people aged 15 to 44. Every year, violence claims about 1.3 million lives around the world, and those numbers only capture the fatalities. When we widen our view to include non-fatal violence, assaults, sexual violence, intimate partner abuse, psychological abuse, the scope becomes staggering. Survivors live with consequences that ripple through their physical, emotional, and spiritual lives for years, sometimes for a lifetime. Now, the effects of violence are not just immediate injuries or traumas. Survivors often struggle with depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, self-harm, and even chronic health issues such as heart disease or poor maternal outcomes. And when violence happens in childhood, the long-term impacts can include substance use, risky sexual behavior, personality disorders, and even higher rates of criminal involvement later in life. In short, violence reshapes a person's life trajectory. But alongside these grim realities, we must also talk about resilience, the human capacity to adapt, to recover, and even to grow in the face of suffering. This is where religiosity and spirituality enter our discussion. Let's define these terms carefully. Religiosity usually refers to belonging to and practicing within a particular religious tradition, following the rituals, doctrines, and communal life of that faith. Spirituality, on the other hand, is often understood as a personal search for meaning, for connection, for purpose, sometimes expressed within a faith tradition, sometimes apart from it. Research consistently shows that religiosity and spirituality, RS for short, are linked to better mental health outcomes. A major review by Moreira Almeida and colleagues in 2014 looked at over 1,100 empirical studies and found that higher levels of religiosity and spirituality were associated with lower rates of depression, less anxiety, fewer suicide attempts, and lower substance abuse, as well as an improved quality of life and faster recovery from mental illness. In fact, in clinical settings, simply taking a spiritual history, asking a patient about their faith, their sources of meaning, has been shown to increase treatment compliance and satisfaction. Yet, despite this evidence, spirituality is still often neglected in everyday medical or psychological care. But here is the complexity we must not overlook. Religion and spirituality can both help and harm. On the one hand, positive religious coping, such as finding meaning in suffering, experiencing closeness with God, or receiving support from a faith community, can strengthen resilience and recovery. Survivors who are able to frame their suffering within a compassionate or hopeful theological framework often show remarkable healing. On the other hand, negative religious coping, such as interpreting trauma as divine punishment or feeling abandoned by God, can deepen despair and worsen outcomes. Survivors who are told that their suffering is their fault or that God has cursed them may carry crushing spiritual wounds alongside their physical and emotional ones. Beyond the personal level, religion also functions at a societal level. Religious institutions, churches, synagogues, mosques, temples, serve as powerful agents of social control. They shape norms about sexuality, gender roles, marriage, and morality. Sometimes these norms protect the vulnerable and promote justice. Other times, they reinforce stigma, silence survivors, or perpetuate myths that excuse violence. So, as we begin this lecture series, here are the guiding questions I'd like you to keep in mind. How does violence, especially sexual violence, reshape the lives of individuals, families, and communities? What role does religion play in helping survivors cope and recover, and in what ways might it actually harm them further? Can we separate the life-giving, healing dimensions of faith from the oppressive or harmful interpretations that sometimes emerge in religious traditions? By the end of this journey, I want us to see that religion is not a neutral bystander in the story of violence. It can be both a barrier and a bridge, a source of trauma and a source of healing. Understanding this dual role is key if we are going to respond wisely, whether as scholars, practitioners, or community members. So, with that framing in mind, let us now move into our first major theme, defining violence and rape, and exploring why definitions matter, both legally and personally.